Hey everyone, welcome. Let's jump right in. Have you ever stopped to think about what actually turns a simple promise into something, legally binding? It's one of those things that seems complicated, but the core idea is actually pretty straightforward. We're going to break it all down. So, let's start with a big question. Is every promise you make a legally binding contract? I mean, think about it. You promise a friend you'll call them back, or you say you'll help them move next weekend. Can they sue you if you don't? Phew. Thankfully, in most cases, the answer is a big no. And the reason why all comes down to one single, powerful legal idea. Okay, let's put this into a real-world scenario. Imagine your friend says, hey, you can have my old laptop when I upgrade. You're super excited, right? But then, plot twist, they give it to their cousin instead. Now, you're definitely annoyed. But do you have a legal case? Can you actually take them to court? Well, the answer to that is hiding in the concepts we just mentioned. And that secret ingredient, the answer to our laptop problem, is a legal principle called consideration. You can think of it as the magic element that transforms a casual promise into a rock-solid binding contract. It's basically the law's way of stepping back and asking, okay, wait a minute, was this a real deal or was it just a one-sided gift? So what exactly is it? Well, in the world of contract law, consideration is the price you pay for a promise. It's what each side puts on the table. It's the value that's being exchanged. And here's the key thing. It doesn't have to be money. It could be an action, another promise, or even agreeing not to do something. You probably heard the classic Latin phrase for this, quid pro quo. It literally means something for something, and that, right there, is the absolute heart of this whole concept. For a real contract to exist, there has to be a two-way street. I give you this, you give me that. Simple as that. And this really breaks down the core difference, doesn't it? A promise to give a gift is just a one-way street. It's what the law calls gratuitous. Fancy word, I know. Basically because there's no quid pro quo. But a contract? That's a two-way exchange. It's backed by consideration, and that's what gives it its legal bite. So let's go back to our laptop story. Your friend was promising you a gift. You weren't giving them anything in return for it, so no consideration and ultimately no contract. Bummer, but legally, that's how it works. So if there's one thing to remember from all this, it's this super simple but powerful rule. No consideration, no contract. Just burn that into your brain. It's pretty much the foundation for any real deal you'll ever make. All right, so we've established we need that something for something. But what actually counts as something? Can it be literally anything? Well, not exactly. The law has some pretty specific rules here. So let's dive into the rules of the game for what makes consideration legit. So the law basically gives us a 5-point checklist to see if consideration is valid. A few of these are common sense, right? It has to be requested, it has to be real, it has to be legal. It can even be for something you did in the past or will do in the future. But there are a couple of points here that are really interesting. First, the something can sometimes come from a totally different person, not just you. And second, and this is the one that really gets people, it has to have some value, but it doesn't have to be adequate or fair. Let's dig into that last one a bit more, because it's a big one. Okay, let's put that rule to the test with a kind of wild example. Imagine someone willingly agrees to sell their house, which is worth, let's say, 8 lakh rupees, and they agree to sell it for just 80,000. I mean, that's a massive difference. It seems totally unfair, just a terrible, terrible deal. So the question is, would a court actually step in and enforce a contract like that? Believe it or not, yes, a court absolutely would. As long as both people entered into that deal of their own free will, that contract is very likely valid. So you're probably thinking, why on earth would a court enforce such a lopsided deal? Well, here's the thing. Courts don't see their job as deciding whether you made a good deal. Their job is to decide whether you agreed to the deal. It all comes back to a big principle called freedom of contract. As long as nobody was tricked or forced into it, the deal is the deal. Now, a crazy low price might make a judge look a little closer to check for fraud, but the price itself doesn't automatically kill the contract. Okay, so we've been hammering this home, right? No consideration, no contract. But you know how it is with the law? For pretty much every major rule, there's a twist. There's an exception. So now let's get into the really fascinating situations where a promise can actually be binding, even without any consideration at all. Yep, you heard that right. After everything we've just gone over, there are these special cases where the law basically says, you know what, in this specific situation, we're going to enforce this promise anyway, even without a clear quid pro quo. They're not common, but they are super important to know about.
And as you can see here, these exceptions are really specific. For example, a formal written promise made to a close family member, like a parent to a child, out of natural love and affection, can actually be binding. Same goes for a written promise to pay off an old debt, one that's technically so old you couldn't be sued for it anymore. The common thread here seems to be that these are situations with a really strong moral duty, and the law decides to step in and recognize that even when there's no normal two-way deal.
Okay, so you've got a promise, you've got valid consideration, or maybe you fit one of those rare exceptions. You're thinking, great, my contract is rock solid, right? Well, not quite. There is one last giant hurdle that every single agreement has to clear, and it's a big one. Its purpose has to be legal. This is a total non-negotiable. It's really just common sense. A court is never going to help you enforce a deal that's illegal or designed to hurt someone. It doesn't matter if your consideration is perfect. If the whole point of the contract, what the law calls its object, is unlawful, then the contract is dead on arrival, void, kaput.
So what counts as unlawful? Well, it's pretty much what you'd expect. Anything that's literally forbidden by a specific law, any deal that's fraudulent, any agreement that involves injuring someone or their property. But it also goes a bit broader, to cover things a court sees as immoral or just bad for society. For instance, you can't have a legal contract to bribe a witness or to pay someone to drop a criminal case. The legal system just won't touch those deals with a 10-foot pole.
So where does all this leave us? Well, the next time you shake hands on something or make a serious promise, just pause for a second. Think beyond the handshake and ask yourself that one crucial question. What's the quid pro quo here? What is the actual consideration? Because understanding that simple idea, that's the first and honestly the most important step to figuring out if your simple promise just turned into a legally binding contract.